Welcome to Living in the Past, where two middle-aged dudes relive their past by enjoying the pop culture of their youth. Devin, are you ready to go to a Christian prep school, private school, to play football, become the most popular kid on campus, sign an honor code, go to some school dances, be found out that you're Jewish, deal with racist classmates, all the while using them to get into Harvard?
Jeremy, I'm not going to lie. I was looking forward to recording this podcast, but then I feel like the carpet was kind of pulled out from underneath me because this entire time I've been prepping for Family Ties with Alex P. Keaton, and now apparently we're not doing Family Ties.
No.
We're doing School Ties. But here's my question, Jeremy. Is it ties regarding the neck piece wear, or is it ties as in grafted in, tied, binded to one another?
The former would be interesting, but I think it's the latter. They're bound.
Throw my notes out. Damn it.
It's the 30th anniversary of 1992 film School Ties. It was basically starring the who's who of hot young male actors at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm quoting someone, Devin.
This episode's already going into the tank.
Oh, but Devin and I could not do the show alone, so we brought in an expert, Ashley. Former student.
Yeah.
Former student. So, Ashley, why on earth do you want to hang out with your former teachers to talk about a 30-year-old movie?
I'm questioning that now.
Rightly so.
Ashley is one of our faves. Yes, teachers do have favorites.
It's true.
I dropped that on my students this past week.
Yeah.
I just said, hey, I'm not going to tell you, but I do have favorites.
Yeah.
And they all were like, is it me? Is it me? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you, but yes, we do have favorites.
Yeah. Is that a mystery to kids? Did you know that? Like, while you were here at high school, Ashley, did you know, like, you weren't even just like one teacher's favorite, but you had multiple teachers that considered you favorite?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was aware.
Yeah. How does that play out, like, on the street, like in the quads and in the lunch lines and stuff, when you know you've got the juice?
Not much in high school.
Okay.
But now in college, yes.
Yeah.
Because everyone's just like, oh, can I get on like the good side of this
got you. So you're continuing your student favorite trophy and title on into the college years. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's a run. That is a run.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Ashley's not only our favorite, but she's a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And so, Ashley, one of the things, we needed an expert in here, but we are fully aware that you are up to a lot of stuff. Take a second, just tell us what you're working on so we can promote you, celebrate you, and just let the world know what Ashley is up to.
But I also want to add, turnabout is fair play. So if you indeed ever need someone and you need to like fill a position,
yes,
on one of your film locations or projects, I know a guy.
Okay. I'll call you up.
Yeah.
So I am a senior in film school, and I'm graduating in May. I'm going to be a director, screenwriter, and producer. And right now we're working on a lot of different capstones, which are like our student thesis films.
Yeah.
And specifically for me, I wrote one called I Choose You,
Mm-hmm.
which follows the story of two dancers who kind of go through revealing of different shattered truths and a hidden illness and unspoken love through the movement of their dance. And it's also a little bit based on my own story of living with cystic fibrosis. So that's where a lot of the inspiration came from. And right now we are in pre-production for this film, and in the spring we're going to go into production, then post, and then it's going to be premiered at my school, then sent off to different film festivals.
That's awesome. So two things. I'm going to take full credit that the title of the film, I Choose You, is based on me choosing you as a favorite student.
Okay.
So I expect to see my name in the credits. But For those that are the uninitiated, so what is pre-production? What does that even mean?
Yeah, so pre-production, it's basically you're working with the producer, so you're gathering cast and crew and creating a budget and schedule and basically planning for the entire thing. And then production is you're filming it.
Got you.
And then post-production is all of the editing and everything that goes into that.
Okay. See, and Jeremy, I think this is where we can take a page out of Ashley's playbook. And like when our bosses say like, hey, have you done this? I'm just say like, I'm still in pre-production mode. Yes. We're not quite at the production mode yet, but I'm still in pre-production.
The problem is I'm scared that some of my current students are listening to this. And I'm going to get that line. Like, hey, Mr. Scott.
I'm still in pre-production.
I'm in pre-production. Oh, my goodness. But Ashley, you also have a GoFundMe for the project, right?
I do, yes.
Where, like, is it just the title of the film? Like, how could someone find it?
So if you type in I Choose You short film, it should be the first thing that pops up. Also on my social media, I'm promoting it there as well, specifically on my YouTube channel, Ashley's Roses. I just created a video where it explains what this film is about and shows a little bit of what the inspiration was behind it. And then as we progress along throughout the process of this, I will be releasing like different behind the scenes videos.
Nice.
And, really cool. What it's like casting and working with some of my friends who are like amazing people who are going to be amazing creators in the film industry. So
and with your GoFundMe, do you have like different levels and stuff, or is it just like, hey, just kick me, you know, what you'd be spending on crappy gas station coffee anyway, help a film student out?
Yeah, so anyone who donates, their name will automatically go into the credits.
Yes.
So your name will be in the film. And you're also automatically entered to win a little giveaway of film apparel. So you'll get a little cruise shirt.
Wow.
A couple other things. It's still in the works.
I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah, we're
excellent.
We're in.
Jeremy, have you had your name in any credits of any film that you could share with a PG audience?
The only, I have a screenwriting credit that's out there.
Wow.
In the world. Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
You're kind of a big deal.
Hey, thanks. Let's keep that theme going.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote a screenplay called The 30. And it's about the martyrs at Sebaste. Some Christian martyrs. They were Roman soldiers. So I wrote a screenplay, got made. We were trying to sell it to History Channel. Didn't happen.
Wow. But it's out there though.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing that exists. Yeah.
That's great.
College roommate Trey Reynolds, who now works for Sony Pictures. He directed it. So yeah. Hey, we need to move. We need to talk about School Ties. Enough about my screenwriting.
Fine.
Thank you, patrons. We could not do this show without you. So Tessa, Abby, Trevor, Travis, and Dave, thank you. And we have a show that's in the off weeks. We do the main show. That's what you're listening to right now. But our off show is called Be Kind Rewind. That's where we're just kind of filling in missed stuff from our main show. But the topic on Be Kind Rewind this week is we're going to be talking about the best school-based movies of the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Wow.
Talk a little Dead Poet Society. We'll talk a little Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I was going to say, yeah, we can talk all we want, but ultimately it's Fast Times at Ridgemont
High. Which we did earlier this year. It was like one of our episodes earlier this year. So, Devin, when did you first see School Ties? Was it in the theater?
It was, but I'm sorry. I know you want to get down the road with the podcast, but I just have to ask, since Ashley's here, when we say things like "Be Kind, Rewind," does that do anything for you, or
do you have any idea what we're talking about?
Do you know what we're talking about?
She doesn't. She doesn't. Okay, Devin.
An entire show dedicated to a phrase that our youngest audience members
knows.
Why is it called that? That's so weird.
At least I'm honest.
All right.
Okay, so Jeremy, back to your question. Saw it in the theater. 1992.
No, wait. Devin, be a teacher and teach Ashley Be Kind Rewind.
So back when Mr. Scott and I were youths, so VHSs, you've probably heard of those, right?
I had some growing up.
Yeah, see, there you go. Jeremy spitting his coffee back in his cup. So there was the controversy was probably second to only COVID in the United States. People were taking their VHSs back to the rental store and they didn't rewind the tapes. And so there was an entire movement, right? Yes. An entire movement that they started slapping stickers on the cassettes that says "Be kind, rewind," and then you get charged if you returned it and it wasn't rewound. So "Be kind, rewind" is from that era.
I mean, it was basically, just say no to drugs.
Right.
Nancy Reagan.
Right. And Be kind, rewind. Yeah.
So you saw School Ties in the theater?
Yeah, during college. It was actually recommended by one of our listeners, Mac. And, he had seen it and he promoted it to me like, you're going to enjoy this, because he and I had seen Dead Poets Society together in the theater. And then also there was a bit of a football connection. And then I'm just like, okay, like I'll go see it. I trust his insight, and I was not disappointed. I was disgusted, but I wasn't disappointed.
Yeah. It's one of those movies that I saw in the theater too.
Yeah.
But it didn't do great box office business. But I was aware of it. Like, it was something that was on my radar, so I went and saw it in the theater. I was in college too.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember thinking how charismatic Brendan Fraser was. I was like, and that was his first film.
Yeah,
like,
wow.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But Ashley, was this prepping for the show? Was this the first time you heard of, seen School Ties? Like, what was your kind of like first impression of the film?
I'd seen clips of it from like teachers showing it, but I didn't really know what it was from. Like sometimes it was just us learning about different angles.
Oh,
and such.
okay.
So that was the only way I had known about it, but this was my first time watching it.
Yeah. What's your first, like, what was your initial impression of seeing it? Was it something like, oh, this is good? Or like, oh, this is a 1992 movie? Because Devin and I, nostalgia's all over this for us. I mean, we're like certain times. So it's sometimes harder for us to have a critical eye, but you're coming to the film with fresh eyes. Like, what'd you think?
Yeah, I liked it. When I started it, I actually had to stop it because I was like, wait a second, I don't know any context of who's in this or who's directed it. So I had to stop and do my research before I began watching it.
Yeah.
And then once I did that, I was able to appreciate it more. And I think it's, it hasn't really, I mean, it's kind of sad about how history repeats. But, like, I thought it was very fitting, especially for this time and age.
Yeah. It's interesting. Robert Mandel directed it, and he's made the classic Tom Berenger film, The Substitute.
Oh,
so
I mean, as a professional educator, Jeremy, that is second to only like The Principal.
Yes. I think in The Substitute, he literally pulls out like a Glock or like some sort of like machine gun. Or,
it's teacher fantasy camp, basically.
It's totally. So he's made that, but he also made a lot of ABC after school specials.
Yeah.
He's made some other things.
Wow, because this was actually written, I think, by Dick Wolf of Law and Order fame.
Yes.
Yeah.
And based on like some of Wolf's experiences in his high school years, which is sad and cool. Like it's interesting when a filmmaker is able to take their own experiences and put it into something they're making. The story's pretty straightforward. I mean, when you look at the story, it's like the script ain't that complex.
Right.
I mean, you have basically Brendan Fraser plays David Green, a Jewish high school student who is given this, I guess they never say it explicitly, but I guess he gets this athletic scholarship. Maybe they did say it, but I don't remember them saying that, to this elite Massachusetts. It's where they filmed it. Like, so this Christian, they never say Protestant or Catholic, but I'm assuming it's more Protestant Christian prep school. And he's just goes there his senior year, but he's basically a ringer they bring in to win the game. Yeah. His racist classmates, they discover that he's Jewish and they put him through hell as a result. That's the basic story of School Ties. Yet I would say the cast like takes something that's pretty straightforward and not that complex, and I think they elevate it.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because this ensemble that's here is. We look at other films of that era, especially late 80s, early 90s, and I'm thinking specifically of like Young Guns and Young Guns 2.
Yeah, right around the same
where
time.
Great ensemble cast, but I don't think that cast pulls School Ties off.
No.
I think this collection of actors is brilliantly picked.
Yeah.
because of how they portray their different characters. And they're the age of the actual characters, which is sometimes a rarity to actually get the proper age for the characters.
Right.
Ashley, when you look at like from your lens as like a producer and stuff, and you're looking at putting like cast together, like what are some of the things that go through your mind? Because it's obviously more than just like, who looks good on film or who can like recite a line of dialogue. So what are some things that you've learned of like collecting a cast that could bring insight to like this situation with Skull Ties?
Honestly, it comes down to if they can make it believable. Like, can I believe what they're saying?
Yeah.
Not only with how they say the lines too, but also how they respond to when the lines are being said.
Okay, so there's a little bit like it's got to feel organic, authentic.
Yeah,
it's not like the Steve Buscemi meme that says "Hello, my fellow kids," right? He's got a skateboard in the hallway. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Frasier even said, I think at one point, and there was an oral history that Entertainment Weekly did, and going to what Ashley just said, Frasier said he read with Damon, and he said Matt Damon was not going over the top with everything. It was all very understated, so he matched that. And he said Matt Damon was so great in the reading and the audition that he goes, I got the role of David Green because of Matt Damon.
Wow.
I was just trying to I was just matching him the whole time.
Wow.
And everyone tried out for, like, Matt Damon tried out for this character, David Green. Like, everyone was trying, even like, if you've seen Friday Night Lights, the TV show, Kyle Chandler, who plays the coach, he tried out for David Green. Like, everyone was trying out for this role, and Frasier gets it. What, for both of you, and either one can jump in, like, the cast is believable. Yeah. Is there any standouts in the cast that just kind of, oh, wow? Because they're all, I mean, if you look at the main, like, 4 or 5, you have Brendan Fraser, Chris O'Donnell, Matt Damon, Cole Hauser, who's very popular right now in Yellowstone, probably one of the fan favorites of that show, which is arguably the biggest TV show right now.
Yeah.
You have, of course, Ben Affleck is in it. Anthony Rapp, who is on, he went on to be famous for his role in Rent, the Broadway musical.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of really talented people.
Yeah.
Is there a performance or an actor or someone that just kind of rises up for you personally as you watch the film?
I think Brendan Fraser is probably one of the most underrated and yet beloved actors of that generation. I really do. I mean, he's been put in some like roles. I mean, we can look at like Airheads or George of the Jungle. But the thing about, and certainly the Mummy franchise, but I think that largely I think nails the part. And going back to what Ashley brought up as far as being like authentic and organic, like I believe that he was that character. And I can't say that for a lot of leads in a lot of films, right? There's a certain amount of buy-in I have to do as a viewer. But for this, I think it stood out to me. But Ashley, I'd love to know from your perspective who stood out.
Honestly, I'm blanking on the actor's name, but it's the one who kind of had the breakdown in French.
Yes, it's McGivern. Well, no, is that the teacher? It's Andrew Lowry, I think is his name. Is the actor's name.
His performance stood out to me.
Yeah,
like you could really see like the emotion, the stress he was going through.
Fascinating tidbit is for the French audience, they actually changed it to an Italian teacher, and then the French that was in the original film was overdubbed into Italian, as to not offend the French. I kid you not. I kid you not. Yes, true story. True story. As to not offend the French audience. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. So they made. I think that the teacher's name became like Rinaldi or something, and it was actually as to not offend the French.
Are you messing around with me?
I am not messing around with you.
That's really interesting.
So, if Ashley weren't here right now, I'd probably say something about the French in very colorful language. But
Devin's playing nice.
Well, it's, I just she's
put him on his best behavior.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think that scene is really affecting.
Yeah.
Like just the brutality. I actually had this conversation with students in one of my classes recently. students were just complaining about stuff. And
What?
And yeah,
That's so weird.
I know.
It happens on my side of campus too from time to time.
Poor babies. But a student's like, why do teachers become teachers? And I was like, that's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I've seen a lot of different like reasons.
Yeah.
And I go, sometimes, sadly, there are teachers that become teachers because they love to have some weird type of authority over people and
Power dynamic.
yeah, some weird power. And I go, and I told them a story of like one of my worst experiences with a teacher, and they listen, but like that's not unbelievable.
Right.
Like what that teacher does to that student, just
Totally.
like embarrassing and humiliating, and like I've had that happen to me.
I think that was largely, especially I think at a wealthier private school, that was almost an expectation or the norm.
yeah.
Right? I
Yes.
mean, because the film was 1992, but this takes place decades earlier.
55.
Yeah. And
yeah.
so I think that was kind of a thing because even like, my mom grew up going to Catholic school and like it was a thing to get your knuckles wrapped by like wooden rulers or paddled or whatever else.
Yeah.
So what we see there is not an exaggeration of anything that was going on around that time period.
No. And going back to like Frasier's performance, it's shocking to me because you have like everyone does great.
Yeah.
Chris O'Donnell, like they're all Matt Damon, they're all like memorable. Even Cole Hauser, kind of the brooding kind of kid that like
Right.
they think was the cheater
Right.
at one point. They're all great in their roles, but what surprises me the most is Frasier exuded such charisma. Like going back and watching it, I watched Dead Poet Society recently, and the performances are great in that. They're fine. But no one is near as charismatic as Brendan Fraser is in that role, in my opinion. Like he just it's one thing because you can be like a high school, quote unquote, high school kid in a movie, but really it's just an adult. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I felt like he was a high school kid.
Yeah.
But I also was like, yeah, I've seen kids like him that are leaders.
Yeah.
I taught a kid and coached a kid who later went on to West Point, unbelievable kid.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of the same stuff. Like on the football field, just the way he carried himself and led people and like encouraged his teammates, but also would like when things went wrong was the one that would stand up. Like I had character.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like far-fetched to me as I'm watching Brendan Fraser play this part. And to me, just knowing this is his first big role, I'm like, holy cow. Like it's really, to me, shocking. Everyone else does great. But Fraser, I'm just like, this guy is special.
Well, I think part of that too, though, and Ashley, I want you to jump in here too, because, and just so our listeners know, if it wasn't clear, that Ashley has been a high school student more recently than Jeremy and I. But I think, I think we do this film a disservice when we actually compare it to things like Dead Poet Society, because largely that ensemble is working together.
Right.
Whereas Brendan Fraser is working against the rest of the cast.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the things that like really brings his performance to the top when it comes to this particular set of circumstances. But Ashley, from your perspective, like when you are looking at things through the lens of producer or director or even actor and stuff, when you see that an actor, like they've got it, like what can that do to make the film an even better experience for the viewer?
I feel like it kind of sets a tone for also like with the other actors, because you can kind of sense it too.
Yeah.
Like you can see everyone's just like working together, and like they have their groove. Like you can see it. I mean, it's not something that you can fix and post. Like it's not.
Right. Oh, great point though. Yeah.
You either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
So like having everyone, like all of their, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like everything just molded together so perfectly for this.
Yeah.
And like even with like Sally and her reactions to finding out that he was a Jew, and just everything like that, just like the momentum that it kept having consistently throughout all of the different characters. Like it was definitely very evident that it had the precedence of like that one character, like knowing like this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And then having it just kind of like the domino effect.
Do you feel that, based on just like your understanding of the backstory and stuff from the research you did, but just even more so just as a viewer and a younger viewer, did you feel like how those characters were portrayed was realistic to like how high school students would interact with one another, and how they often can have their own little cells of gangs to gang up on particular students? And that, did you find that believable?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I don't think mainly for like current events,
right,
or like what I experienced in high school.
Right.
I would say more so closely in college.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, yes, probably yes for other high schools nowadays, but not really for my experience.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's interesting. Talking about that idea of like ensemble, bring chemistry,
right?
Like, does it work? Do they mold together?
Right.
Like, it's interesting. Like Mandel, the director, said in this oral history, he said, Brendan Fraser hadn't done a movie. They found him in Seattle. We liked him because he felt other than everyone else. He was a little taller. He was a little bigger. I mean, he must be like 6'4". I know Ben Affleck's like 6'3".
Yeah.
And he seemed taller than him. And he's a little bit bigger guy. He was not Jewish, but he felt other than the rest of the cast. A couple of people we cast in supporting roles wanted to do David very much. But you put Brendan in a group of 10 other guys, he clearly was David.
Yeah.
If the movie is about blending in, then he was going to have a harder time blending in than Chris O'Donnell, Matt Damon, and any of the others.
Yeah.
And I think you needed that kind of like that other, just his character. Like not that he was Jewish other, but like his character was honorable and good, and these other characters, it wasn't. They were spoiled, and they were wealthy, and they were, everything was handed to them, and then here's this other. I love that part of it. Talking about the cast and the story, I think you have this great ensemble working together, and football is part of the story. Did you need the football? That's the big question. Like, I know you need some sort of vehicle to get them there.
Yeah.
But I was very underwhelmed by the football in the movie. And maybe that's just having been a coach and watching these guys run around going, they're not football players. I think if there was ever for me a moment where I was like taken out of the film, it's actually when they played football. And Fraser even said he didn't like to hit people. Like when they were, because they had to really carefully choreograph everything. And he's like, I didn't like to hit people. And I'm just like, of course.
That reminds me of a current high school football team that I see every Friday or so in the fall.
Oh, really?
But here's what I think. I think it is the vehicle. And I think that, I don't know that in the 1950s, that we're going to get, like, I think that's authentic football for that time period.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's authentic football for the high school elite preparatory school at that time period. Right. I don't think, and I'm saying that through the lens of, well, one, a historical understanding of that time, but two, like, we work at a school that right now in the lifespan of this school, some 97 years, like our current football program is filled with kids that mirror a lot of the characters in this film.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of that, and I know we're going to talk about part of it later, but part of that is the fact that I think it's the alpha male thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there is some street cred by playing it. Yeah. But when we're comparing it against schools that would actually be like powerhouse athletic schools, I mean, this ain't Friday Night Lights, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper. We're gonna kind of transition into something we haven't done in a long time on Living in the Past, and that is our segment we call Three Big Questions, where we ask kind of three questions that deal with the movie, but also maybe have a higher altitude view of the film itself. So We'll be right back.
3 big questions.
Three, two, one.
All right. So we have 3 big questions to ask and answer. And the first one is sort of what we've been dealing with. And it is this. What's the difference about students today and what is the same about those that are in school ties? So similarities and differences between kids today and kids in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
Differences, technology.
Yeah.
Everything else is the same.
Everything else is the same.
Else
What?
Is the same. Everything else is the same. Wow. Kids are like, and this isn't even restricted to like kids in the United States. This is just
Right.
like, I think that like the longer that I'm in the education game, the more I find out that like there's some little strands that change
Sure.
here and there, but ultimately kids are kids and they're going to deal with the same stuff and they're going to cause the same ruckus regardless of geography or regardless of type of school or whatever else.
Right.
It's just the degree to which things get turned up to 11 or not.
Right. Okay. Ashley?
I second that.
Yeah. What? She's my favorite baby.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I disagree with both of you.
Oh, well.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't see in my context.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are contexts out there.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I mean, it seemed like every kid across the board studied. like really was like, I have to be successful academically.
Yeah.
Of course, it's in a private school. Like they're plugged into the Ivy League. If they don't do well, one of the themes in the film that comes up again and again and again, especially with Matt Damon's character, is if I don't do this well, I don't satisfy my family.
Right.
Keep the standards that my family has.
Yeah.
Get into Harvard.
Right.
Like, and so he was just driven to the point where he cheats.
Yeah.
Right. To do well.
Yeah.
It seemed like almost every kid in the film had that sort of bent, like that mindset.
Yeah.
I don't see that today.
I think for like, I would say for college, at least right now, it's specifically, especially like with film, like a lot of my classmates and I have been talking about this, and it's not really the fact of like letting people down or like fear of like that we can't do it. It's more of the fact of like, we can't afford to live out here in California and all that with the way that everything is going. And a lot of my friends, like we call ourselves like the hustlers of the school because like we're always going. And it's more of like we pressure ourselves for that, but it's like a good pressure to like keep each other going. But it's more of just like the fact of like, if we slow down, if we stop, like, where are we going to live? You know?
Right. Like almost like the basic economics of the current state of the world or state of California specifically. It's like, I got to do this or I'm not going to be living in this state anymore.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, and I'll push back on what you shared, Jeremy, is there are clearly still schools where kids are like that, right?
Sure.
Where it's they're trying to out compete one another.
Yeah.
I think that certainly we have kids like that at our current school that are, whether it's through intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, that are hard workers academically.
Right.
But certainly our school is not, we're not an elite preparatory school. What? Just despite having international baccalaureate status. But I think that we've arrived at a spot where like for our area, so for those of you that are listening in other areas that are beyond like Central Coast California, a couple things you should know, like a traditional what I'll label as East Coast preparatory school, like we see in the film School Ties, would not fly here.
You couldn't make it.
It couldn't.
Yeah.
It couldn't. And that's not to say that we don't have a lot of students in this area that probably would excel in that, but the culture, I think, doesn't jive with the culture that we have here in this area.
Right.
But I'll go back to what I said before. Yes, I certainly agree that like there have been students that largely, like if you're going to compare our current school to the school portrayed in School Ties, certainly, yeah, we don't see the academically driven student on that scale. That scale.
So, thinking about what these students in School Ties do and comparing them to students today, and like, are they saying? Here's this is an additional question to our 3 big questions.
Oh, wait, so the 4 big questions?
Yeah, 4 big
Holy
questions.
cow.
So I'm really perplexed by this.
Oh.
So there's a moment in the film where they really decide to go after their French teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And they take his car and somehow put it in his office. Is it his office that they put it? How did they do that? That's my big question. Like, was the doors big? And I watched the scene twice and I couldn't quite figure out how did they get the car in his office or residence? I don't know what it was. Any insight? Like, it reminded me of Real Genius, where Val Kilmer puts.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyways.
As part of a former crew of offensive linemen that took our teacher / coaches, you remember the little Honda Civic hatchbacks?
Yes.
Right. We man lifted that, and took it. At the high school that I went to, there was like an island, and we took it and we put it in the middle of the island through it. So you had to through a grove of redwood trees.
Wow.
And then we chained it to the flagpole. And we liked this guy, and we liked it. Yeah, that's some people. That's some people that we did like. Anyway, I don't know. I'm assuming there was probably
they picked it up. There was a bunch of guys that ran at the car.
Yeah,
but I'm like, I'm okay. Yeah, pick it up. I get that.
Yeah, but
how did they like you're moving a couch? Did they twist it sideways to like fit it in?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Ashley, any insight?
I honestly didn't question that. I was like, nice.
Ashley, going back to high school, if you had a student or a teacher that you would do that at high school, you don't have to out the person, but does someone come to mind? Like if you're going to take a teacher's car and put it in their classm, does a high school teacher come to mind? And why is it Jeremy?
I plead the fifth.
Oh, wow. That's why I was so concerned. Mm-hmm. Like, as I'm watching, I'm like, wait, if they can do that, then there's some kids that can take my white minivan
and
put it somewhere.
Who knows?
And they all know where I live because I live on campus. Not good. Not good. So my next question is a really light question. It's real, just, airy. It's not, there's no depth to it, but I figured I should ask it, Are private Christian schools just breeding grounds for racism?
Wow.
Just a light question to just dig a little bit deper on living in the past.
Yeah. Having known this question ahead of time, I had a lot of opportunity to research and consider it. And, here's my profound answer. Yes.
Well, I think it's actually, so I have a little experience being in different schools. I went to 16 schools before I even got to college. I went to 6 high schools. Several of those high schools were Christian schools.
Yeah.
One that I went to was in 9th grade in Alabama. And I got there midway through my 9th grade year. My dad retired from the Air Force, moved to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. This school no longer exists. It was called West End Christian. And I left in 10th grade. So I was there basically a semester and a couple of weeks of 10th grade. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, come to find out that this Christian school was a white flight school. And it could be, this can become a very long story, but I'm not going to make it. But but essentially the school was created when schools were being integrated.
Yeah.
And the white communities in Alabama were like, nope, let's create this air quotes Christian school so all the white kids could go.
Right.
And it just bred even in, I was there in 1989, 88, 89.
Wow.
It continued to breed racism.
Yeah.
And it got really crazy.
Yeah.
My dad had retired from the Air Force, couldn't find a job. So he had gone 6 months, couldn't find a new job. And the head of school of that school left.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had a doctorate in education. They hire my dad.
Wow.
My dad, love my father. He integrates the school.
Nice.
And realizing like the community in which we lived, there was where that school specifically was, there was a lot of poverty. So he's just given academic and athletic scholarships to mainly African American kids. And it's like the hate we got, like the calls that we got at our house and things said. So I asked that question kind of feeling there are some that absolutely are breeding grounds for racism. And you see in School Ties, it's almost this like flippant, like, they don't even think, they don't even realize just how racist they are.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. But I don't feel like where we currently work, that's the mission of the school.
Right.
Like, but I do think some are like,
Well, and I think a lot of this comes down to, and listen, we don't even need to put the label on of like Christian school.
Right.
Any school that is private,
there
comes a time when there's probably, and listen, not every kid, but certainly when you have a private school and tuition is involved, there often is a sense of entitlement that comes along with that.
Right.
And whether that entitlement is just like an echo chamber of what's going down in the household, and it's just making its way to the campuses, or whatever that looks like, it's just enabled at home, or whatever else. And I think that, and obviously by no means am I excusing any of the behavior of the schoolmates in this film. I think that a lot of people just don't truly know better because it starts at the home, it's enabled at the home, and why wouldn't it transfer to the school where all of these enabled youth live a lifestyle of privilege? So I don't know, but like Ashley, like you've got experiences both at a private high school, you're going to college now, and so like what do you see that reflects like what we saw in this film?
So I mean, for high school is private. I mean, it's where you guys are at, and there were moments I did see some racism, and there were some things that I experienced that I didn't know was racism until afterwards. And then I did go to a private college for a year, and there were little things of racism there, but again, I wasn't aware of it till afterwards.
Right.
But where I am now, it's not private. What was it? Public? Not public college. What would you call? What do I go to?
I don't know.
Would you say more? It's like a public college? Not public college.
It's not public,
but it's like it's not private.
Yeah.
A lot of us don't tolerate it.
Right.
Where I go now.
Yeah.
Like we will say something, and there are people who will still try and continue to be racist about certain things, and they're honestly blacklisted. Like within our specific major, like. I mean, it happens in the industry, but also like we won't want to work with you. Like we'll blacklist you, and you'll have to like figure out your own assignments by yourself.
Wow.
And I think that that's probably, if we see a difference in the youth of today, I think that's probably one of the major differences. I think there's a much stronger collective voice of we're not going to put up with that BS.
Yeah, and also. Here especially, like in where we're at in California, I one of the things that I positively enjoy watching is how many, not all, but many students are very open to like different gender, different race, different like religion. Like there's an openness. I don't see that everywhere in the country, but here, like with young people, I definitely see that, and I see a willingness to say something on
Right.
their part,
Right.
which has been probably the most refreshing. Like,
Right.
hey, that's not good.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that. And
Right.
they'll totally, like, whether you say blacklist or just like we're done.
Yeah.
Like, I can't
Right.
do life with you if this is how you
Right.
are.
Right.
So I've seen that.
Yeah.
Occur in the classroom,
Yeah.
like in interactions between students. The film School Ties, it's interesting because so much at first seems subtle. I mean, to us as an audience, it's like, wow, that was a pretty racist thing to say.
Right.
But amongst them, it's just part of their language and how they talk, and there's this subtlety in their racism that it builds to the point where
Right.
they're putting a swastika in David's room,
Right.
which, oh my gosh, Gene Siskel was a famous
Yeah.
film critic, and Siskel and Ebert, famous show.
Right.
He Jewish, went to I believe he said it was a private school. I was reading an old interview with him when
Yeah.
School Ties came out.
Yeah.
Which was right before he passed away, and he said, and I cannot believe this.
I know where you're going with this. It's crazy.
The toast.
Yeah.
He was given toast, and the jelly on his toast was in a swastika.
Yeah.
And so when he's reviewing the film, he said, like, yeah, this hit home for me.
Right.
Like, this happened.
Yeah.
Like, this stuff went on, and
Yeah.
I'm just horrified by that. In School Ties, there's several. Obviously, there's this backdrop of David Green being Jewish, talented kid, football, academically. He gets into Harvard. It seems like he's going to Harvard by the end of the movie.
Right.
Super talented kid, but just getting bombarded with just like everything from like little racist comments to like outright overt racism and hate.
Right.
But with his journey, there's sort of several like storylines going on. You have the storyline with football,
Right.
which sort of ends about midway through the film. Like, they win the big game and all that. You have his relationship with Sally.
Right.
And you have the whole honor code stuff that's really going into like from Act 2 into Act 3.
Yeah.
It really kind of builds. So you have all these storylines. In your opinion, just as a film, where is School Ties at its best? Is there a certain place where you're like, yes, this is, for me as a viewer, I'm the most locked in. For me, it was the honor code stuff at the end. Like,
Yeah.
I really, and of course it's building to a climactic moment. Right?
Yeah.
But that was where I felt the most invested and the most interested. But I'm an educator, so that stuff. But what about the two of you, Ashley? Where for you is there a storyline or an aspect of the film where you felt the most engaged, or you felt the film was at its best?
I think towards the end, that's when I like started taking the most notes because a word that kept popping up was tradition. And they started out like in the beginning when he was in the chapel. Talking about football traditions and also talking about his own traditions with being Jewish. And that was like the first time that he heard of it. And then later on, that just kept popping up when people were like, why did you lie? Like, you know, what about your traditions and all this type stuff. And I don't know, just having people ask him that just made him kind of like question a little bit about like what he had done for himself.
Right.
And as he was saying that, like, he lied to his father and he lied to himself. And I think at that moment, I was just like, wow. Like, that's true.
That was a good moment. And early on, I was trying to, as you were saying that, I was trying to find that line when they're in the chapel, but it was basically like, you know, how does it feel to break tradition? Because he had missed this Jewish holiday where he needed to be in the synagogue, David Green, and he responds. I think he says, "Whose tradition?" Oh. The headmaster says, "Was it worth it breaking a tradition just to win a football game?" But that's why they brought it. Like, and he said something really interesting. Your tradition or mine, sir.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like they have this tradition of keeping people out. Right. I just thought, and I was watching it with my wife, and I go, what did that mean? Like, it was taking me a minute to catch up. Like, what is he referring to here? But you're right. I think that comes up again and again and again. And I think even at the very end, he says, "I'll honor your tradition. I'll go to the headmaster and I'll lie. Right when they're in the boardroom trying to figure out the honor code. He's like, I'll honor. Like, your tradition is to be pretty horrible.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
that's really interesting. And that comes up again and again and again. Yeah. I don't know. Devin, what do you think?
Yeah. I think, as a viewer who was 20 when this came out, it was probably more so not just the football part of things, but I think just like the relationship part of things.
Right.
I think now, this, going back to like Dead Post Society, I think a lot of educators can look at the character that Robin Williams portrays and be like, that's who I want to be. Right.
Right.
And none of us are.
Yeah.
But I think another film that came out actually 10 years after this in 2002 is The Emperor's Club.
Yeah. Similar theme, right?
Yeah, especially when it comes to like the academic integrity piece of things.
Yeah.
And I think that especially now that rings so true, because I think I think it's the hope, right? I think I'll speak only for myself, both as a former high school student and as a current high school teacher. But I think like as a high school student, I didn't care about learning.
Right.
I cared about socializing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for me now as a teacher, like I weep for my former self, right? Because I missed a heck of a lot of opportunities. But I think that that's also the thing that like I wish my students would, I guess, learn from my mistakes.
Right.
Is to like be there, and that it's not so much an honor code for the sake of having like an honor code from an academic sense, as it is just like we all expect like goodness out of one another. And how dare we try to shortchange not just quote unquote the system, because the system can never be hurt, right? But when whenever we cheat, we're shortchanging our peers.
Right.
And I think that that's the piece that really like I could dribble off names right now of kids in my class and it's like, man, I wish they would get this part of it.
Right. Right.
So I think for me, like right now as a middle-aged dude, that's the part that most resonates with me now.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the honor code stuff.
Yeah.
It's that whole sequence of the film. I feel like the acting is at its best. Anthony Rapp, who is mainly known for his Broadway work, Rent, but he was also in like a lot of these guys were doing Dazed and Confused. In fact, Richard Linklater was like went to bat for Anthony Rapp to be in School Ties because they had filmed Ben Affleck, Cole Hauser,
Right.
Anthony Rapp had done Dazed and Confused right around the same time.
Right.
Rapp was talking about those concluding scenes, and he said how heavy they were and how hard they were. And he said, we filmed that tribunal scene all day long. Part of my role as an actor is to shine a light on darkness. Like that was his role. And he goes, if you're playing a racist or bigot, you have to go there. By the end of that day, I really had to go home and stare at the wall. I just felt so bad to evoke that over and over again all day long.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's like they honor, yet they're being like these horrible racists that's clouding any honor that they have. Like and so I found dramatically like the acting in that section is they're wrestling with like integrity and honor and truth and like I was like, this is really what a great stage play this would be.
Right.
Like just the interactions, and you can see it's fun because this is at the beginning of all these guys' careers, but you can see the talent. I mean, it's just, and right now, Brendan Fraser has just released a movie, Darren Aronofsky made it, called The Whale, where Brendan Fraser plays this like 600-pound guy. Yeah. And, got a standing ovation at the Cannes Film Festival. People just adore this movie. Yeah. I hope he gets nominated. Like he's having kind of this resurgence. Is like, oh, we forgot he was so insanely talented. Yeah. And you see it in this. I did, as just a fan of movies, I just loved like the performances, the interactions, just the big ideas. I would almost love to just show that scene to not my film students, but my history students as well. Just like how they're wrestling with these really I think themes that we're still dealing with.
I think that's
today.
the thing, right? Like it's evergreen, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really ever fade away, regardless of the costuming changes.
yeah.
But ultimately, we're dealing with the same issues. For the time period that this film was supposed to take place till now.
Right.
We're looking at what 65, 70 years, and like we're still dealing with the same crap.
Yeah. Same stuff.
It's kind of pitiful.
It is, and it's yeah, it would be an interesting vehicle, like to use School Ties to kind of like talk through this with like high school students. I don't know how I'd fit into curriculum, but like it's such an interesting exercise to like watch it and then like we're doing, like just talking through it.
Yeah.
The honor code stuff, what to do, just the whole, but one of the things that really got to me in watching it, and I don't know if you guys felt this way, was how those in authority handled the situation. Like they were like, you guys solve it, which I'm okay with. Like you have an honor code, fix it.
Yeah.
But like the final scene where the head of school, there was like a priest or like I don't know what kind of Christian school it was, but like you had a guy with a collar.
Yeah.
And then who was sort of like a spiritual leader of the school, because he preaches and prays early on in the film. So you have this like spiritual leader, the head of the school.
Yeah.
You have, and there was another, I think, just a teacher, the history teacher was in there. And just how they dealt with the situation, like they didn't see, like they were blind to kind of the racism that was going on, and how wrong everything was. And it was just like the head of school was like, well, let's put all this behind us. And I'm like, no, like, no. You put a light on it and fix it. And I just found that really interesting how, in some power structures, you just like, you have these leaders that are not willing to change. Let's just keep the status quo.
Well,
and I felt like that was like, oh, that's really like we're dealing with that now.
Well, and I think that's part of, again, going back to just like the evergreen content here. I mean, 1955, like this is before the civil rights era, right? This is before. This is before.
Well, Emmett Till's he's executed. By that white gang of people, like in 54. Like so, this is like Little Rock is about to, like. Montgomery bus boycott. This is when this is happening. And
I think that it's interesting too, because we was talking about more macro issues here, and I think that that's another part of this, right? Is I think that when it comes to like that piece of tradition and morality and things like that, and we're looking at like the bigger tale here is it's not the honor code that is the problem per se. It's the much more macro issue of like the honor code is only a buffer between that and their actual like morality, life guidelines. And so I think it's just I'm not doing a good job explaining this, but I'm trying to, I think, say that like it's interesting that it was more of a concern of theirs to have this honor code figured out, than it was to look at the bigger picture that was probably much more ingrained into the school with racism and everything else. That was much more of a problem than the actual academic code.
Interesting. I don't actually, when you were a student here where we're at now, but then also in college, like, I guess the honor code at Monte Vista would be somehow wrapped into the student handbook, but was that anything you ever touched, like, as a student?
Like
just like the basics of cheating and like academic honesty and all that. Like, was that even on the lips of students? Was that even? And do you see anything like that in college?
No, okay. Let me think about this for a second. There were times we discussed it more so, like in choir. Out of all the classes,
that's like, really interesting.
Was the one that we discussed it the most. I feel like sometimes some of my friends would discuss it just because like they just took like their studies to like the whole next level. But and they're like very serious about it, and I'm like, I was a goody two shoes, like I could never. But I mean, in college, it's just kind of like we don't discuss that, but it's kind of like, if you if you get caught, if you do something, like, that's on you. That's not on us or anything like that. That's all on you.
Yeah.
Do you think that it is, and I know some schools have it, do you think it is possible for high school kids to have like this, not just an honor code, but like it's the equivalent of like, you know, ASB at the school that we're at right now is like, we do functions and rallies, but they don't even dip their toes into the water of like honor codes and stuff like that. Do you think that honor codes can be properly upheld by like a student governing body? Or do you think it's like, that's my homie over there, or that's the popular kid over there, so I don't want to do anything that would like wreck my street cred?
Right.
Do you think that an honor code that's driven by a student body could actually be pulled off?
It could.
Yeah.
It could, within reason.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, you'd have to have like a board of people of different ethnicities.
Oh,
to
for sure.
properly,
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like with this generation, like definitely,
Yeah.
because we're kind of like the generations that's just sick and tired of the past and how history repeats itself.
Right.
And a lot of us like stand up and push against it.
Right.
And will argue back because if it's wrong, like we don't need to continue it. you
Yeah.
know?
I agree with that. I would love to be to a point where we had students that not only had enough integrity, but had the courage to make tough decisions like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that in so many ways, unless you were like, had unanimous consent from a student government, like I think that it's in many ways could be like social suicide. And that is, I think, like one of the primary things that kids get out of like the high school experience is like they're trying to figure out who they are, but they want to be like known and be known, right? And not for like bad things. So I'd love to get to a spot, and I think, Jeremy, going back to one of the earlier questions, just about like how have kids changed, I think that's like one thing that I would love to see. And Ashley, you're right. I think that this generation, like Gen Z especially, has more courage than previous generations when it comes to like calling out peers when it comes to stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see that. And, you know, it's interesting just that I think that's just when here, let's do this. Let's go to our last segment because it connects with the point I'm about to make. So let's go to There Can Be Only One.
3.
That's not it.
There can be only one.
All right, There Can Be Only One. It is the time in the show where we talk about the single best thing, character, moment, scene, line, theme, or song about the movie. I was trying to make a point, like, my favorite stuff is with the honor code and applying it. And just, you have the character that witnesses, and this was my favorite thing in the movie, was the character's name was Rip Van Kelt, I think was his name. And he was the guy that witnessed Matt Damon cheat. And, you know, he's the whole time they're in the boardroom, he's just quiet. But finally he comes forward and protects and shields, like, you know, Brendan Fraser's character. And I found that interesting. Like Matt Damon doesn't change. Like, so many of the characters don't change.
Right.
You know, Chris O'Donnell maybe inches a little bit more toward like being open to being kind to people that are different than him.
Yeah.
But I felt like Rip Van Kelt, this like huge change. Like he makes this like, I'm going to throw away my best friendship.
Yeah.
Because he even says like, he just says it. He's like, he's been my roommate for 4 years. Like insinuating we've been through so much together.
Right.
But what he did was wrong, and I'm going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And like he honors the honor code.
Right.
And in that moment, like, I thought that was, for me, that was my favorite moment. I'm like, yes, like someone's heart changes from being racist.
Right.
Like he was complicit in all of that happened.
Right.
starting to change. I don't, you wonder like how does he end up,
Yeah.
But I really, it was like, yes, I like that. That's really cool to see that in a character.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my favorite thing. So Ashley, what about you? What's your favorite thing about School Ties?
Can you come back to me?
Yeah. Devin, what's your favorite thing?
I think on a similar note, Jeremy, it's maybe unexpected, but always hoped for is like some form of like redemption or restoration. And I think that is even, and actually I want to know like your insight into this, but I think that is even tricky when it comes to things like overt racism, because I think like we live in a time right now, present day, where, just in the past 2 weeks, we've had like major public figures in the world of like music and sports have like overtly had racist comments on social media, and one didn't apologize and the other one was more like a PR apology.
Right.
And so like, I think for me, like the redemption arc is great. And I think like as an educator, like I want to see my kids' hearts change.
Right.
And at the same time, like, one of the benefits of the film, The Emperor's Club, is it fast forward like 10 years later.
Right.
And we get to
That's
see
the good
like
part about that.
Yeah. And so like we get to see like, do the decisions that were made as high schoolers actually stick into adult life? Because I think, we all have those moments where we say like, oh, I'm going to change, right? I'm going to do things differently. And maybe we do for a little while, but does it stick? And so I think for me, there's like, yes, that's a great moment. And I guess it's probably like the moment that I resonate most with because that's what I want to see happen.
Right.
But there's also, I'm old enough at this point in life to go like, I also know that sometimes decisions like that are made and it's easy to be on a very slippery slope and backslide into old habits, regardless if it's racism or anything else. But Ashley, I want to know your perspective on that.
Yeah. So thinking about it, like, I don't think there's like one part where I'm like, yeah, this is like the message. This is what I want to take away from it. And it does leave it kind of open-ended at the end. And I think, when you had suggested that this is the film that you guys are going to be discussing, and then everything started to happen with the news, I'm just like, oh, interesting. It's interesting film to watch now.
Right?
It totally is.
And then afterwards, I was just like, well, more people need to see this film, but also that's like, it's like a bittersweet. It's like you hope for that change, but also the way that the world is, you're like, yep, history just keeps repeating. And it's just like that. Yeah, you want to hope that people are going to do the right thing, but you never know what can happen in the future. But I definitely think it's a film that people need to see and have and hear the message. I think throughout the whole film, I was just like, oh, this is really good. Oh, that's a beautiful point. But I don't think there's like one point where I was like, yeah, like it was just like, the world really needs to see this right now.
Right.
Jeremy, do you think, because, you mentioned like showing this film to your class and stuff, and there's part of me that like, oh, I would carve out time to do that. But then I also wonder at the same time, are the kids that aren't racist going to like look at this and go like, great film? And are the kids that are racist would be like, why are those guys apologizing?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's like, it goes back to like, how do you change a heart?
Right. Right.
Like, and I don't like, I don't know if I can fulfill that role.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting how the film ends. And I made a note to myself, if you guys remember it, there's a confrontation where, Matt Damon pulls up in his beautiful car that he's being chauffeured around in, and he says some racist thing to David Green.
Yeah.
And David Green is just like, well, you'll still be a prick,
Yeah.
And like they drive off, and then the music, it's an odd choice for the filmmakers. The music swells and picks up, and it's like da-na-na.
Yeah.
And he just kind of walks across the snowy field of the campus, and I'm like, yeah, I guess he kind of is going to win. But like I felt like the music was really like not what I was feeling. It was just a lot of sadness. And like, almost like in the way David Green or Brendan Fraser's performance of Green, like the way he walked, it's not like this victorious thing. He's just like, I'm still going to be in it. Like, I'm still going to have to deal with all this. And I'll use it to get into Harvard, but like the world hasn't changed.
Right.
You know, and so it's interesting. The music's all picking up like to make us feel like he won.
Yeah.
But like one guy might have changed a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe. He's still in it. It's so I kind of appreciate the film for that, but I'm like, why did they use the choice musically that they used? Because it's trying to evoke an emotion in me that like just ain't there.
Right.
Like, and so I found that really interesting. But it goes back to your point, Devin. Just like do you change? Does it change people? Does this like how do you change? The hearts of people. I the only answer I have is somehow you experience relationship with people that are different than you,
Right.
and you experience love in those relationships,
Right.
And I think that's when you can change,
Right.
But you don't see. I mean, you would hope that you would see it in the way they stick up for each other when they play football,
Right.
That love would develop and camaraderie and all that, but it doesn't change them. And so you wrestle with like, well, how do you fight against the racism that we're seeing really even now that's so prevalent? And it's like, I think that might be an answer. You hope that's the answer. But, you know, this film would, I think, makes it good is that it leaves things like, hey, this is a fight that's ongoing. Like David is going to have to go and keep fighting this fight.
Well, and I think that's if there's the opportunity to unpack it in dialogue after the viewing,
right?
I think that's the beauty of the way that this film concludes. Yeah, barring the happy soundtrack. Right. But I think that, you know, I like the fact that it's not wrapped up in a little nice bow.
Yeah. Neither was Dead Poets.
No.
And the Emperor's Club is similar.
Oh,
you know?
The Emperor's Club is just like, if anything, the Emperor's Club just underscores like people often just don't change, period.
Right.
And I think that like, if we're using that as a runway for dialogue about these issues, that's a good thing.
Right.
And so I hope if we're to show students to it, it wouldn't be like, okay, hey, that's the film, you know, how many stars you want to give it? But like, if it becomes the vehicle for, and now let's unpack what we just watched and why and how it connects to us.
Right.
I don't know that in and of itself changes hearts, but I think you're at least keeping the conversation alive. And I think that that's an important part of things is, as an educator, it can often feel like so overwhelming to try to do any good. Right. And I think that films like this give us an opportunity to connect in ways like obviously a lecture wouldn't, or a short video wouldn't, or whatever else.
Right.
Because film is in and of itself fairly like evergreen. Like everyone wants to watch a movie, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it can be a vehicle. It can provide an opportunity for further dialogue, which I think is good, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to become so cynical in my job that I'm just like, I know that kid's going to be just a racist little prick for the rest of his life, no matter what I say or do. Right.
Like, are we at the end of the show?
Can you roll some happy music so we can at least
I
feel
just
like
have our concluding music.
Man,
that's
good
it.
night. Wow.
All right. Any final thoughts before I close this thing out?
Yeah. Go to Ashley's GoFundMe.
Yes.
And go fund her. Go fund her project.
Amen. Ashley, any final thoughts?
I like the use of the Dutch angle in this film.
Yes.
Oh, whoa.
Explain Dutch angle to our wonderful listeners.
Dutch angle is kind of like a tilted shot, so it's not straight. It's usually is at a tilt, either facing up or down, and it gives the feeling of unease.
Yeah.
And that is when Green was taking off his necklace.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, good touch.
Yeah, it's subtle, but it was really good. Yeah, there was several little, like, for a guy that made after school specials for ABC.
Yeah.
Like there was some really, like, his collaboration with the DP, like there was some really, like, good touches throughout, like really smart ways of approaching different sequences. So
wow, I felt super like outclassed when y'all start talking about Dutch angles and stuff. It's like, wow.
it's okay, Devin. We have you here for comic relief.
Oh man, even that's setting a bar pretty high.
Well, you can find us on the Current Dumpster Fire Twitter at Livin the Past, LIVIN the Past. Hey, we're doing stuff on Patreon, patreon.com/living in the past. We got a lot going on YouTube as well.
Yeah, we're happening.
We just made a video called The Overlooked Hero of Aliens. It's about Bishop, the android. And we're working on it. At some point, Devin and I are going to sit down and watch Samurai Cop.
Yes.
For our show video revelation. So go on over, find us on YouTube. You just have to type in Living in the Past podcast, and you'll see us pop up there. Our next episode is Be Kind Rewind. We'll be just talking about best movies that are set in the schoolhouse. So we'll be talking a little Emperor's Club, Dead Poets Society, Fast Times.
Stand and deliver, baby.
Yeah, Breakfast Club.
Freedom writers, Jeremy. Freedom writers.
Yes, like... It's going to be wild. It's going to be wild. As always, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in a week.